Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be picking up, getting so close here to the end of Eightball. I'm on issue number 17, going through the new Fantagraphics softcover of the collected complete 1 through 18 in Facsimile edition. So here we are on issue 17. These later issues have been really enjoyable for me. The only downside is that a lot of them are things that I have in the caricature volume that I already have, so I've read some of these, but it's good to revisit them in context of the whole thing. One thing that I've noticed is in these later issues, Clowes is taking a more kaleidoscopic approach, where there'll be one or two little reference points in the major stories that seem to resonate with each other. So in this one, right out the gate, you have this character here. This is a pretty famous Clowes piece, Gynecology. This character here, Epps, the main character, is going through kind of the different changes he's made in his life, kind of typical Clowes outcast who's grasping for identity. And he's talking about at some point he feigned asexuality to try and win over some sexually ambiguous women. And this character just goes through like all of these different changes, looking for connection, looking to reach out for people, and eventually gets himself into a, untoward relationship with the gynecologist's wife. This story is really complicated and has a lot of figures weaving in and out. And while I was reading it, I was getting the sense that Clowes, like, he wanted to tell a longer story. He's having to give real abbreviated, like, he has all of these characters that are interesting characters, and you only get a quick look at them, and their relationships are stated very quick and bluntly. And I started to get the sense that, this could be even more compelling if he had more time to really dive into and like find real meat in each character. And then I saw in the end notes that he has in this book, at the end of the whole book, he has notes about each story, and he was saying this is the one where he started to feel like he wanted to do, instead of anthology format, kaleidoscope format, he wanted to focus on single stories. And I was like, yeah, it felt like this wasn't quite enough for him. The other thing that I like about this is, instead of just, really blasting everyone like an early Eightball, and instead of even being self-critical like issues starting in issue 11 or so, where he's reevaluating, now as he's critiquing these characters, he's also giving bits of their history and tell you why they got to where they're at. So there's a little bit more sympathy towards the characters. And I think that's making him a better and better writer as he goes, right? He's not just writing from experience. He's able to synthesize that and maybe try and get into the character's head instead of just being critical of them from the outside. And that's why this story here maybe is a famous one for him, is it really feels like this and Ghost World are where he becomes a writer instead of just a great cartoonist who's like firing at the culture at the time. He's becoming a writer. Here I made the note that this would make a really good graphic novel, and that would let him flesh everyone out, because the different characters and their motivations are so compelling to me as I read this. It's also the first one that's like broken up into chapters. Epps gets into drawing these awful racist old cartoons, and he's presenting them ironically. And so part of the story is you get to see him become a famous artist. Just had to crack up here. I remember this line as a good line. This is the gynecologist himself, and he's having a memory of his first patient and his disastrous attempt at bedside humor. As Popeye would say, at your cervix. And obviously that went over like a fart in the room. So yeah, it's just moments like that. And then here you see that these awful racist characters he's got has become a cultural phenomenon, and they're starting to show them on boards. And I can't imagine someone putting this in a comic today. And the idea that there's some future society where this would be popular for advertising again is just absolutely absurd these days. So I don't know. It's good on Fantagraphics for not excising that out, at least. He also deals with, like, obviously dealing with his status has been raised in the comics industry by this point in time. Obviously, a lot of celebrities. There's a letter in here where someone's telling him that Eddie Vedder came in and bought all the comics, and hurry up, he better make fun of Eddie Vedder before he becomes too popular and a sellout. He's obviously achieved a fair amount of acclaim by this point, and that's part of the story of Epps as well, I think. And he's talking here about, he himself, of course, is the exception, talking about Epps being this now he's at the height of his fame. His personal histories cascade before him as patternless complex of conflicting phases and tangential nothings, defining a human matrix so unfathomably obscure as to yield an infinite number of correct interpretations. That's talking about his work has become that. Epps feels a dull ache behind his tonsil. He opens his mouth and looks to the mirror, but sees only the handsome blur of a tragic, misunderstood genius. So that idea of like society just reinforcing your ego seems to be something that Clowes is struggling with. That seems to be part of the main thrust of the story, besides all his just like little kind of surreal character studies and stuff. This episode of Ghost World is interesting to me because they switch again, that they're not using the blue anymore after the disastrous orange. I'm not sure if that was just a monetary thing or not. I'm sure my collected Ghost World that I have probably is blue all the way through. I'll have to go and compare them, but I'll probably get rid of those two Clowes collections that I have because I think it's all in here now. One thing I hadn't realized about Ghost World is that Ghost World was actually something that's written on walls in the story. I didn't realize that till here. I know it's always showing up as graffiti, but I thought that was just like a little Eisner trick. I didn't realize it was actually part of the character's surroundings in a real way. But seeing it in this photograph here and having the characters talk about it is interesting and like open that world up for me a little bit. He also says in the notes that Ghost World was just supposed to be a one-off, but he kept coming back to the characters and the story grew. So you can see that storyteller in him growing. He's got to say more about these characters, and I think that's great. And then that resonance I was talking about here is they talk about, oh yeah, I don't know, I guess it's possible that this guy, that they both kind of, they're both suggesting that each other should sleep with this guy, Josh, and they're saying, I don't know, maybe he's asexual. And given what Epps does earlier, where he feigns asexuality to attract to kind of sexually ambiguous women, where you have these two characters who kind of, at least one of them seems to have lesbian feelings for the other one in a kind of unsorted, ill-defined way, you get that resonance where you realize that this Josh character is probably doing the same thing as Epps. He's feigning asexuality to like ingratiate himself to Becca and Enid, to try and eventually wind up sleeping with one of them. And he has shots at both of them. You also see that Enid has like a pretty great caring dad. Up to this point you think maybe she had a bad home life, but she's just this kind of misanthrope that's lashing out and trying to find her identity. And you over the course of Ghost World, you really see her identity getting broken down in a painful way. A lot of painful lessons, and it seems earlier on like Clowes is kind of admitting some of his own painful lessons, and as the story goes, it seems like the characters take over a little bit more. Here you have her coming over to Josh, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna sleep with you because like whatever, I need to get it out of the way before I go off to college or something. And Becky and Enid kind of have a plan that Enid's gonna sleep with them, and then she'll leave, and then Becky can like step in for the sloppy seconds because they think he actually likes her more anyways. So she gets this guy all riled up and then has an emotional breakdown. So feel real bad for poor Josh. But hey, if you were feigning asexuality as a little joke, I guess you're asking for it there, buddy. And then here, she's really struggling with her urge to be unique, as an alienation, as separating her out, and this little bit of nostalgia that brings her back to when she was just a kid listening to dumb kid stuff. Really seems to soothe her. And so I think Clowes there is talking a little bit about you don't necessarily need to be the outsider. You don't have to define yourself that way to be cool. Especially if that's leaving you feeling outside and alone. Like, turn back to the inside. There's stuff going on in here. So I just really feel he's full power as a writer. He's always been full power as an artist, but now he's actually saying some things that are worth saying and stuff like that. And I really like these two stories in this volume here. So that's it for 17. He's also doing these awesome covers. I've been wondering about how he pulled these off, by the way, and in his notes in the back he was saying that he was working mostly with watercolor and gouache. So now I know that this isn't some weird tricky production thing he was doing. These are just watercolor and gouache paintings with maybe some marker, if I remember. But that makes a lot more sense. It's a beautiful look. I mean, astonishing that he's pulling this off with watercolor and gouache. The precision of it all is is fascinating. He said they took him about a month apiece, which is intense. So anyways, that's issue 17. We've got one issue left. Thank you to everyone who's followed me this far. I hope it's been worth it. I'm really enjoying seeing this as a chunk. So we will be back to finish this up soon. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us, there's 2 ways to do it. One is through our Patreon. There's 2 different tiers there of engagement that you can patronize us with, that comes with different voting rights and exclusive content and things like that. The money we get from that goes back to help us buy the books that we review. So just try to turn that money right back into other creators' pockets, and this helps us keep exposing you to new people's work. So we really appreciate that. And then the best thing to do is to support the mission of Living the Line, is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll take a look at one of Sean's projects now. Plaza by Yokoyama Yuichi. This is translated by Ryan Holmberg and is very large for a manga, so that's a really cool feature of this book, this standard manga size. And this is just a 200 some odd page representation of what Yokoyama Yuichi thinks of the Carnival parade, and he's just made this like relentlessly loud and rhythmic book that pushes all kinds of amazing boundaries of what comics and manga are, and we could not recommend this book more. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.